You're sipping your oat milk latte, scrolling X on your heated couch, thinking, I could totally survive the Ice Age with a flint rock and some grit. Oh, sweet summer child, think again. The Ice Age wasn't a cozy ski trip with hot toddies. It was a frozen hellscape where every day was a battle against frostbite, starvation, and creatures that saw you as a walking snack. Let's break down why you, dear modern human, would be a popsicle by lunch. You open your crusty eyes in a cave that smells like a wet dog convention. Your bed, a pile of leaves, bones, and a mammoth hide so scratchy it could double as sandpaper. No Tempur-Pedic, no silk sheets, just a lumpy fur blanket that's one sneeze away from disintegrating. The cold hits like a personal grudge, punching your lungs and turning your toes into ice cubes. Coffee, not invented. Alarm clock, the primal growl of your stomach demanding food or death. Your joints creak like a haunted attic. And you're only 24, basically a senior citizen in Ice Age years. You glance around, your tribe's already up. There's an elder snoring like a dying bison, toddlers smeared in soot and mammoth grease, and your cousin sharpening a rock while muttering about hunting a saber-toothed cat. You check your toes. Yep, frostbite's knocking. Breakfast isn't a protein shake. It's a desperate archaeological dig through snow for a route that tastes like despair and regret. Your outfit? A patchwork mammoth pelt that smells like your ancestors' worst decisions. It's heavy, itchy, and barely covers your dignity. Welcome to your morning. Wake up, freeze, contemplate existence, repeat. The cave's ambience is less cozy cabin and more damp dungeon. The wind screams through the entrance like it's auditioning for a horror flick. No windows, no gentle sunrise, just a rock hole that lets in more cold than light. You try to sit up, but your body protests like it's unionized. First thought, am I alive? Second thought, where's my left foot and why can't I feel it? Spoiler, it's still there. Just auditioning for the Frostbite Hall of Fame. Your home is a cave, but don't expect a Pinterest-worthy interior. It's a jagged hole in a rock face that leaks like a bad faucet and smells like something died in it. Because something probably did. The ground's always wet, like living inside a soggy boot, no matter how many furs you pile on. It's a swampy nightmare. There is none. The corner of the cave is the bathroom, which is a generous label for where nature just happens. And if it's below zero outside and the nearest stream is half a mile away, guess who's not washing their hands today or tomorrow or ever? Despite all this, you consider the cave home. Why? Because no cave? You're stuck with a hide tent that flaps in the wind like a sad drum solo, or a shack made of mammoth bones and desperation. Insulation, layers of animal fat and existential regret. In winter, you huddle around a fire you pray doesn't die. In summer, you suffocate under furs so thick you're basically a walking mammoth. Every season's a new flavour of discomfort. And your only goal is not dying before dinner. You're not picky, you just don't want to be devoured in your sleep. That's the bar, that's the dream. So, yes, rent is free, but survival is not. You pay daily in frostbite, respiratory infections, and the creeping sense that every shadow might be a bear looking for a midnight snack. You live with your entire extended clan, 3 mouldy animal hides, and a haunting sense of dread. And still, somehow, this is the best case scenario. So, next time you complain about your tiny apartment or the Wi-Fi being slow, remember this. Your ancient ancestors slept with one eye open, one leg in a puddle, and one hand clutching a pointy rock, just in case. Now, let's shift gears to ancient Sparta, where surviving the Ice Age might seem like a vacation compared to their brutal lifestyle. You think you could impress the Spartans? Get stabbed in the leg and still be expected to make polite dinner conversation? Actually, no. You'd be expected to skip dinner and use the time to sharpen your sword. You know how modern motivational speakers say things like, get comfortable being uncomfortable? The Spartans said that too, right before hurling you into the woods to survive off bugs and pride. Still thinking about impressing them? Let's do a quick vibe check. Emotional sensitivity? Bad. Talking too much? Worse. Flinching when someone throws a spear at your face? Immediate social rejection. And don't get me started on your wardrobe. Forget about cozy cloaks or stylish tunics. Spartans wore the same rough red cloak every day. Why red? Because it hid blood. That wasn't fashion, that was function. You could be bleeding from 3 different injuries and still look battle ready. Personal grooming? Let's just say they like to be clean, but not pretty. Oiling your body was fine, helps with flexibility, but adding fragrance. That's a one-way ticket to ridicule. Hair was grown long, not for vanity, but because a fine head of hair makes a handsome man look even more terrifying. According to King Aialos, imagine shampoo commercials, but for war crimes. So, here you are, standing in the sun, holding a 20-palpical shield you don't know how to use. With a stomach that hasn't seen carbs since yesterday, a Spartan trainer stares you down, measuring your soul for cowardice. You twitch, he nods like he expected as much. You'll die before sunset, he says casually, before walking off to wrestle a bear or something. And honestly, he's probably right. This isn't ancient Greece as you imagined it. This is Sparta, where fear is a weakness, pain is your tutor, and your best hope of survival is to immediately start doing push-ups until your arms fall off. Because if the wolves don't eat you, the training absolutely will. Let's start at the very beginning. You're born, congrats. You've got 10 tiny fingers, 10 tiny toes, and a whole lot of judgment headed your way. In normal places, babies get swaddled, kissed, and handed little wooden toys. In Sparta, you get inspected like a piece of military equipment, fresh off the assembly line. The government literally sends someone, yes, an actual state-appointed baby bouncer, to examine you for defects. The criteria? Brutally simple. Are you healthy? Are you symmetrical? Do you look like you could one day crush a man's windpipe with your pinky toe? If the answer to all of these is a yes, sir, congratulations, you're approved for continued existence. Go ahead and enjoy a brief nipple-based victory lap. But if you fail the vibe check, if you're too small, too frail, or show any signs of not becoming a death-dealing future adult, well, there's a mountain with your name on it, Mount Taygetus, a scenic peak with lovely views, crisp air, and unfortunately, a dark reputation for being ancient Sparta's unofficial baby off-ramp. Infants deemed unfit for military service weren't sent to a care facility. They were taken up the slope, and let's be blunt here, chucked, as in tossed, as in good luck in the next life. Kid. It sounds horrifying today, and it was, but to the Spartans this was efficiency. No point investing food and training into someone who couldn't someday return with a Persian's head on a stick up. Harsh, absolutely, but in their eyes, this was how you kept the gene pool pure, the army strong, and the babysitters very, very afraid. Assuming you pass the first test and don't take a scenic tumble off a mountain, your reward is more terrifying. Survival scenarios. Because Spartan childhood isn't about toys, songs, or loving encouragement. It's about pain, teamwork, and absolutely no hand-holding. After a few short years of milk and being glared at by your father, you're thrown into the Spartan equivalent of daycare, the agoge. Think of the agoge as preschool. If preschool involved barefoot marches through thorn bushes, ritual beatings, starvation diets, and public humiliation. Oh, and wolves, occasionally literal wolves. You enter the agoge at the ripe old age of 7, which is when your parents give you one last slap on the back and say, try not to die. Son, from there on out, your life belongs to the state. Say goodbye to your mum, say goodbye to toys, say goodbye to comfort, and definitely say goodbye to ever sleeping in past sunrise. Training begins immediately, and it is not age appropriate. You'll learn how to fight, how to march, how to obey without blinking, and how to wrestle another child to the ground using only your bony elbows and sheer hatred. Tutors don't hand out gold stars, they hand out lashes. It's a place where you're praised not for being smart, but for being silent while bleeding. Oh. And lying is totally encouraged. In fact, stealing is part of the curriculum. You're expected to sneak food, outwit guards, and take what you need to survive. But, and here's the catch, only if you don't get caught. If you are caught, you don't get punished for stealing. You get punished for failing at it. Spartan logic, folks. Now, let's talk about the food. Imagine the worst cafeteria you've ever experienced. Now, set it on fire and subtract half the ingredients. The Agoge didn't just underfeed kids for fun. They wanted you to be hungry, desperate, and resourceful. Lunch might be a crust of stale barley bread, dinner, a nice bowl of black broth, a culinary abomination made from pig's blood, vinegar and salt. Yes, it tastes as good as it sounds, which is to say, it tastes like despair. And remember the wolves we mentioned? That wasn't metaphorical. Part of your coming-of-age challenge might involve surviving in the wild alone for days or weeks. The idea was to teach you self-reliance, stealth, and how to sleep in a tree while not becoming dinner. Because if you couldn't outsmart an animal, how could you outsmart an Athenian? During this entire time, your emotional support system is non-existent. Showing emotion is for the weak. Crying is for cowards. If you trip, scrape your knee, and don't immediately pretend you enjoyed it, you're getting whipped until you learn to smile while suffering. In fact, they held public ceremonies where boys were flogged for fun. These weren't punishments, they were competitions. The last kid to pass out won honour and possibly lifelong trauma. Some didn't survive. That was frankly expected. But if you did, if you made it through the black broth, the wilderness trials, the beatings, and the chronic iron deficiency, you didn't get a gold medal. You got the right to continue training, because you're only a teenager at this point, and the real horror show has just begun. The Agoge, the Spartan educational system, makes modern boot camps look like spa retreats. This wasn't a school, it was a nightmare factory for children, meticulously designed to turn soft, impressionable little boys into emotionally repressed, spear-wielding war machines. You start at age 7, the tender age when most modern kids are learning to read and tie their shoes. But not in Sparta. In Sparta, you're forcibly removed from your family, and by removed, we mean ripped away from your mother's embrace, like a lamb headed to the world's most intense summer camp from hell. You're dumped into military barracks with a bunch of other trembling 7-year-olds, none of whom are allowed to cry. Crying is a punishable offence, so is whining, so is smiling without permission. Honestly, existing incorrectly in any way is grounds for discipline. Your new home, a cold stone building with no beds, no blankets, and definitely no plush toys. Your mattress, a pile of reeds you harvested yourself from a swamp. And no, the swamp doesn't close for holidays. And yes, those reeds are infested with bugs that see your skin as a buffet. Welcome to the Agoge. From day one, everything is a test. Your strength, your obedience, your pain tolerance, and your ability to endure public humiliation without blinking. There are no gold stars here. The only rewards are not being flogged or being flogged less. The instructors, if you can even call them that, are more like personal tormentors. They don't teach math or writing. They teach endurance, silence, and how to kill a man using only your sense of timing and a sharp stick. You're encouraged to fight your peers daily, not in a supervised, controlled manner. Nope. It's more like a chaotic brawl pit where the weak get battered and the strong get praised for being slightly less broken afterward. And let's not forget the older boys. They're assigned to mentor the younger ones, which in Spartan terms means smacking you in the face whenever they feel like it. You exist to be molded, which often involves being punched, kicked, or publicly insulted for failing to perfectly recite some state-approved poetry while bleeding from the nose. Then there's the food, or rather the lack of it. You're deliberately underfed. The idea is to teach you to scavenge, steal, and survive. Hunger is constant. Your stomach growls louder than your battle chants, so you're encouraged. Yes, encouraged to steal bread, cheese, figs, whatever you can get your grubby hands on. But here's the twist. You're only rewarded if you don't get caught. If you do get caught, that's right. You're flogged publicly in front of your peers. Imagine stealing a piece of cheese, getting caught, and instead of detention, your instructor says, "Nice initiative, shame about your technique," and orders 50 lashes. Welcome to Spartan logic. It's not about morality, it's about competency. You didn't fail by being bad. You failed by being bad at being bad. Spartans even turned cheese theft into a sport. One popular event involved placing a block of cheese on an altar and daring boys to try and take it, while older kids defended it with whips. Think of it as capture the flag, except instead of a flag, it's cheese, and instead of fun, it's scars for life. And nights. Nights are their own special brand of horror. You don't sleep in pajamas. You sleep naked because comfort is for philosophers and cowards. The floor is hard, cold, and riddled with sharp little objects no one bothers to clean up, and don't even think about asking for a pillow. The last kid who tried that is probably still tied to a tree somewhere, thinking about his life choices. And remember, you're surrounded by other kids just as traumatized and paranoid as you. These are not your friends. These are potential assassins, all of whom are also desperate to prove their worth. Sleep with one eye open, because you never know when someone will decide that stabbing you in the leg might earn them bonus points with an instructor. The Agoge also introduced a charming little activity called the Cryptia once you got older, where particularly promising boys were sent out at night with daggers to murder helots, Sparta's enslaved class, as a way to keep the population terrified and the boys sharp. Yes, childhood assassination missions were an actual part of the curriculum. Still think algebra was hard? But here's the kicker. If you survive all this, the beatings, the starvation, the random attacks, the cheese-related trauma, you don't graduate to freedom or celebration. You graduate to even more training. You get a red cloak and the lifelong obligation to be an elite soldier who can't flinch, cry, or ever, under any circumstances, say, I need a break, because in Sparta you're not a person, you're a weapon, a tool for the state, a human spear with feelings surgically removed and replaced with a burning desire to win wars or die trying. So the next time someone complains about school lunches or gym class, feel free to remind them, at least they didn't get flogged for cheese. In most cultures, body image is a personal issue. In Sparta, it's a public health crisis. Specifically, the public's health and your body's role in violently preserving it. Here, physical perfection isn't just encouraged, it's practically legally mandated. Your body isn't yours, it belongs to the state. And if that body isn't gloriously shredded, you're not just letting yourself go. You're disgracing an entire militarized society that expects you to be part statue, part killing machine all the time. The ideal Spartan man? Built like a marble god that skipped leg day? Exactly. Never. Biceps like coiled snakes, abs like stone tablets, thighs thick enough to block arrows. And this isn't just a standard, it's enforced. Daily inspections aren't just for armor and weapons. No, the state literally checks your body like a produce manager, checking melons for bruises. Too scrawny, too soft, not symmetrical enough? You don't get a gentle suggestion to hit the gym, you get public shaming, plus a hearty helping of mandatory beatings with motivational screaming, like, you shame the walls of Lacedaemon. You think high school gym class was traumatic? Try standing half naked in front of your commanding officer as he pokes your abs and decides whether you look like a warrior or a wet loaf of barley bread. And there's no hiding. Spartan fashion is minimalist to the point of criminal exposure. The standard outfit is basically a glorified diaper, a red cloak, a loincloth, and confidence. That's all you get. No tunics, no armor off duty, and certainly no just chilling in sweatpants days. If you've got a weird mole, a wonky nipple, or a love handle, tough luck, friend. Everyone knows, and they will comment. Women are no less terrifying in most ancient societies. Women were encouraged to be delicate, pale, and quiet. In Sparta, women were ripped, loud, and more than capable of suplexing you into next week. Girls trained just like boys, running, wrestling, javelin throwing, and presumably bench pressing weaker men for fun. Why? Because a weak woman can't produce strong Spartan babies, and in Sparta, childbirth was war, and you were the weapon. The state wanted muscular mothers who could wrestle out a future hoplite without flinching. Spartan women were expected to give birth to sons who would grow up to die gloriously in battle, and they weren't subtle about it either. Their baby shower gift registry probably included iron dumbbells and combat midwife services, and these women judged, oh, did they judge, If you were a Spartan man and your pecs weren't looking extra crisp that day, you'd get roasted by a Spartan woman faster than a pig on a spit. What's the matter? Leandros? Your spear is sharper than your jawline. Spartan mums could roast a man to tears while in labour. Public shaming wasn't just allowed, it was a civic duty. In fact, Spartans believed that a well-shaped body was proof of inner virtue. If your muscles were slack, your morals probably were too. If you didn't maintain peak physical condition, the assumption wasn't that you were busy or injured, it was that you were lazy, weak-willed, or possibly a secret Athenian. And there's no cheating the system, no padded armour to fake those traps, no strategic tunics to hide the dad bod. If you couldn't lift your own shield without grunting like an asthmatic goat, you were mocked into oblivion. One of the most devastating insults in Spartan society was to be called a trembler, a man who wasn't just cowardly in battle, but physically unimpressive. It was like being called a disgrace and a soggy noodle at the same time. Oh, and don't think old age gets you off the hook. Even the elderly were expected to stay in fighting shape. Grey hair didn't give you a pass to slack off. It gave you more experience to pass down by punching it into someone younger. If you walked with a limp, they assumed you broke your leg heroically. If you walked with a gut, they assumed you broke your spirit, eating too much honeyed cheese. But the worst fate? Becoming unfit and mocked by the youth. The ultimate Spartan nightmare. The same boys you once beat senseless in the agoj, now pointing at your sagging triceps and whispering. He used to be somebody terrifying, so unless you're already doing burpees at 4 o'clock a.m., while eating boiled barley and yelling for Sparta into a mirror, you're not ready for this place, because in Sparta, muscles aren't just admired. They're expected, inspected, and possibly worshipped. Your body is your resume. Your torso is your philosophy. Your quads are your contribution to society. And if you don't look like you were carved by Zeus himself during a thunderstorm, well, there's always Mount Taygetus. So, you thought maybe you could dodge the trauma by being born a girl in Sparta, sliding through life doing embroidery, humming softly, maybe crushing grapes with your dainty feet, guess again, because while boys were off stabbing each other over cheese, Spartan girls were sprinting barefoot across fields, hurling javelins through the sky, and flexing on every other ancient culture's idea of feminine. In Sparta, femininity came with deltoids. See? Most ancient societies had a sit quietly and bear children model for women. But Sparta said, why not raise women who could crush a boar's spine with a thigh squeeze? This wasn't girl power, it was girl dominance. Spartan girls didn't just run, they outran. They didn't just train, they outtrained. If there was a CrossFit Olympus, they'd already be regional champions. And it wasn't just encouraged, it was legally expected. A weak Spartan woman was a failed Spartan investment. The state needed strong women to produce strong sons because in Sparta, motherhood wasn't a role. It was a military-industrial responsibility, no pressure or anything. Girls started physical training from a young age, running, wrestling, discus throwing, singing competitive songs about strength. Probably while doing squats, they were fed proper food, unlike the boys who often lived off hope and barley crumbs, and weren't locked inside weaving halls. Why? Because Spartans believed weak women made weak babies, and weak babies were a national security risk. Your average Spartan girl could probably lift her own dowry, and speaking of dowries, let's talk rights. Unlike most ancient women who were basically living decorations in their husband's home, Spartan women had legal clout. They could own land, inherit estates, control wealth, and probably crush a tax collector's skull if he got mouthy. In fact, it's estimated that women controlled nearly 40% of Spartan property. That's more than some modern hedge funds. So, while the men were off dying gloriously in foreign mud, the women were back home owning real estate, raising warriors, and roasting anyone who walked funny. And boy, could they roast. Spartan women were legendary for their verbal takedowns. They didn't just insult you, they delivered soul-crushing one-liners with perfect timing. They'd call out cowardice, flab, and failure with the casual elegance of a war goddess who had read every ancient burn book. Come back with your shield, or on it wasn't just a phrase, It was the kind of motivational send-off your mum gave you right before you marched to your probable death. Imagine a society where your own mother judges your bravery based on how horizontal your corpse is. And poetry. Oh yes, Spartan women dabbled in that too. But not the roses are red, violets are blue kind. Their poems were epic athletic diss tracks. If you challenged a Spartan girl to a foot race and she smoked you, which she would, you could expect a rhymed, metered eulogy for your pride within the hour, delivered publicly, probably while she was doing push-ups. But even with all that strength, Spartan women weren't brutes. They were celebrated, not sidelined. Their strength was admired, not feared. In fact, foreign visitors would often leave Sparta equal parts awed and deeply afraid, having just watched a 12-year-old girl casually launch a discus into orbit while chanting a hymn to Ares. And yes, beauty standards existed, but not the fragile porcelain doll nonsense. Spartan beauty was measured in physical health, strength, posture, and the ability to terrify a man into self-improvement. Their idea of attractiveness, sturdy legs, a powerful gait, and the ability to win a javelin contest while wearing minimal clothing and maximum confidence. They even exercised naked, just like the men. Why? Because Spartans had zero chill when it came to body confidence. If you couldn't lift, run, or wrestle in the nude, were you even trying? So, no, being born a girl in Sparta didn't mean you were spared. It meant you were expected to be a beast, emotionally stable, economically powerful, and physically capable of bench pressing your future husband if necessary. In fact, Spartan girls probably looked at the boys in the Agogia and thought, "Oh, look at them, still crying over lashings." Then they went back to practicing discus throws in formation. And if you, modern reader, somehow ended up in ancient Sparta as a young woman hoping to take it easy, you'd be lapped in a race, body-shamed by a 12-year-old, and drafted into a competitive childbirth program by Thursday. Congratulations! You've survived the Agoge, you're scarred, shredded, and you flinch every time someone says the word cheese. You've been beaten, starved, insulted, stabbed, probably, and somehow didn't die from hypothermia while sleeping on a pile of reeds. You're 18 now, technically an adult, emotionally a war-hardened cryptid. So naturally, the Spartans celebrate your coming-of-age milestone with a murder mission. Welcome to the Cryptia, Sparta's version of a graduation ceremony, except instead of throwing your cap in the air, you're handed a dagger and told to go commit state-approved homicide. Still think ancient history was boring? Now let's rewind for context. Sparta had a problem. The Helots. The Helots were the enslaved class, conquered people mostly from Messenia, who were forced to work the land, grow the food, and basically do everything Spartans didn't want to do. Which, to be clear, was anything that didn't involve weapons, sweating, or dramatic flexing in sunlight. The Helots outnumbered the Spartans by a massive margin. Some estimates say 7-1. Imagine trying to maintain power when your entire society is one bad harvest away from a Helot uprising and a nationwide wedgie. Sparta's solution: terror, institutionalized, organized, annual terror, and that's where the Cryptia came in. Here's how it worked. A group of the most promising young Spartan males, usually the best Agoge graduates, that is, the ones who stabbed with extra flair, were selected to participate. They were stripped of normal citizenship for a time, sent into the countryside, and told, blend, lurk in the shadows, and kill Helots quietly. Yes, this was the test. No chariot races, no philosophy essays, just full-on secret police behaviour with zero accountability. The rules were simple. Only carry a dagger and a few provisions. Travel alone or in small groups. Do not get caught. If you see a Helot who looks strong, capable, or mildly confident, kill him. That last part isn't exaggeration. The Cryptia's job wasn't to randomly attack. It was to neutralize potential threats. If a Helot had muscles or seemed like he might one day dream of freedom, that was enough. Bam! Dagger time. The young Spartans would hide during the day, then strike at night, silent, calculating, and legally protected by the state. They learned how to move like ghosts, kill like snakes, and live like murder hobos for weeks on end. This wasn't just cruelty for sport, though it definitely flirted with it. The idea was to instill fear among the helot population and prevent uprisings. A little don't get too bold or a teenager might crawl out of the wheat field, an end you sort of vibe. Spartan government officials even declared war on the helots annually so that these acts wouldn't technically count as murder under religious law. Yes, you read that right. Sparta legally declared war on its own enslaved population every year because even the gods needed to be looped in when your graduation party involves throat slitting. If you performed well in the Cryptia, meaning you didn't die, didn't get caught, and racked up a horrifying body count, you were rewarded with what? Respect, status, and the chance to enter full Spartan citizenship, known as becoming a homoios. The equals in this context means you're now eligible to eat at the adult murder table. You get a mess hall, a voting voice, and the right to spend the rest of your life shouting about glory while sharpening your sword on a boulder. But let's be clear, this wasn't normal. Even by ancient standards, other Greek city-states saw the Cryptia as barbaric, even horrifying. What do you mean your teenagers disappear into the woods to kill enslaved people as a rite of passage? Athens was out there inventing democracy and writing plays about gods in awkward love triangles, while Sparta was perfecting murder internships. And of course, none of this ever really addressed the root issue that the helots were treated like subhuman livestock and regularly terrorized to keep them compliant. The Cryptia wasn't just about building stealth. It was about maintaining a brutal, militarized social hierarchy. So yeah, you graduate by sneaking into farmlands under cover of darkness, ending lives with a knife, and returning home, having proven that you're emotionally dead enough to be trusted with Spartan citizenship. And in that twisted logic loop, you've made it. You're not just a survivor of the Agoge, you're now a full-fledged Spartan warrior. Congratulations, you've passed your murder internship and become a full-grown Spartan warrior. You'd think this would be the part where you get to retire to a nice stone villa, sip olive oil under the Mediterranean sun, and write poetry about your emotionally complex biceps. Nope, you're still not done suffering. Welcome to adult Spartan life, a thrilling, action-packed saga of pig's blood soup, constant war prep, and zero personal space. First off, you don't get your own house or room or even a decent corner, even though you're now a terrifying adult with multiple confirmed kills and thighs that could snap a donkey in half. You're still forced to live in military barracks with the same dudes you grew up getting flogged beside, and not for a week, not for a few years, until you're 30. That's right, 3 whole decades of snoring, burping, flexing, and aggressive male bonding with zero privacy. It's like a never-ending sleepover, except everyone's armed and emotionally repressed. Think of it as a frat house, but the hazing never ends, and the toga parties have been replaced with synchronized spear drills. Also, the floors are cold, and so is your soul. Let's talk food. Specifically, Sparta's national dish, black broth. Black broth sounds mysterious, right? Like something a warlock might eat under a blood moon. Spoiler, it's just as cursed as it sounds. Black broth, or melasomos, was a horrifying sludge made from pig's blood, vinegar, and salt. Sometimes pork bits were tossed in for texture. It was served hot in bowls with no seasoning, no bread, and absolutely no joy to Spartans. This was peak nutrition. To everyone else in Greece, it was a bowl of literal nightmares, a visiting sybarite, basically a fancy food critic from a rich city, once tried it and gagged. When asked how Spartans could eat such stuff, he replied, with the help of war, hunger, and desperation. Spartans didn't care. In fact, they saw this culinary torment as a badge of honor. The worse it tasted, the more manly you were for eating it. Want dessert? Too bad. Dessert is for poets and cowards. And speaking of manliness, welcome to your new daily routine. Train, patrol, polish weapons, do push-ups until your soul leaves your body. Then train some more. You thought the Agoge was bad. Now you've graduated to constant professional warfare. Sparta didn't just prepare for war, it marinated in it. Your entire adult life revolves around being ready to stab someone at a moment's notice, ideally while shirtless and glistening. You practice phalanx formations until your legs scream. You train in shield drills until your arms go numb. You spar with other soldiers, sometimes until one of you breaks a rib and politely pretends it didn't happen. You're basically a walking weapon with a six-pack. But you're not allowed to act like you know that. Modesty was a virtue. Flexing in the mirror? No mirror. Showing off in front of women? She'll out-deadlift you. Romance? Rare. Privacy? Mythical. Now let's talk about your emotional life. LOL. Just kidding. Spartans didn't have those. Marriage in Sparta was weird. Men were encouraged to marry in their 20s, but weren't allowed to live with their wives until they turned 30. Yes, the state actually banned husbands from moving in with their own spouses. Until then, if you wanted to visit your wife, you had to sneak out of the barracks at night like a hormonal teenager. Imagine climbing out the window at 2 a.m. in full armour just to whisper sweet nothings and awkwardly climb into a haystack for 30 minutes of state-forbidden romance. Romantic? Maybe. Creepy? Definitely. Efficient family planning? Not really. Women, meanwhile, ran the households, managed property, and raised your children with the kind of intensity that makes CrossFit look lazy. Also, Spartan wives were known for their sharp tongues and sharper expectations. If you came home from battle without a scar, expect a scolding. Didn't die gloriously enough? Enjoy sleeping in the barn. Weren't brave enough to insult an Athenian poet in public. Divorce? Spartan edition? The state is your mum now. And finally, we must address the main theme of Spartan adulthood. You are not your own person. You live for Sparta. You bleed for Sparta. You don't even eat without Sparta's permission. Every aspect of your life is controlled by the state. What you eat, where you sleep, how you fight, when you breed, your individual desires, irrelevant, your hobbies. If they don't involve javelins or pain, delete them. Even your conversations are monitored. Spartans were trained to speak in laconic phrases, short, sharp sentences with maximum sus and minimum fluff. If you say too much, you're either weak or Athenian. Want to write poetry? Too bad. Want to paint? Get out. Want to cry? Do it in battle where no one can see. So to sum up, becoming an adult in Sparta means enduring horrible soup, endless training, regulated marriage sneaking, and living with sweaty bros for most of your prime years, all while trying not to die in a battle that someone else started. Still think you'd last a day in ancient Sparta? What happens if you run away from battle? Running away from battle in Sparta wasn't just frowned upon, it was a one-way ticket to becoming the village pariah, the human equivalent of a wet sock at a hoplite picnic. While most cultures in history understood that, hey, sometimes self-preservation is important, the Spartans took the opposite approach. They decided that dying in battle was not just heroic, it was practically mandatory. Survival was great, but only if it came with a sword in your gut and your shield still in your hand. In fact, shields were symbolic. If you dropped yours in retreat, it wasn't just oops, it was whelp. Guess you're exiled from basic human respect. Spartan mothers were known to tell their sons, come back with your shield or on it. That was not a metaphor. You either came home as a victorious warrior or as a corpse being carried like a war-torn casserole dish. Coming home empty-handed because you panicked and tossed your shield into a bush to run faster. You might as well have stapled coward to your forehead. So, what happened if you broke this sacred stabby contract and dared to run away? Oh, the state had plans for you. First, the cloak, not just any cloak, a special patchy, multicoloured monstrosity that screamed, I am a disgrace to Sparta, and probably cried during thunderstorms. You'd be forced to wear it around town, a fashion statement designed to make toddlers point at you and warriors spit at your feet. This was the ancient world's version of the Scarlet Letter, except instead of being judged for love, you were judged for not dying violently enough. Then came the silent treatment, and not just from strangers, your own family could disown you. One famous story tells of a Spartan mother who was informed her son had died bravely in battle. She straightened up, nodded, and said, "Good, he was mine." But another mother, upon hearing her son had survived by fleeing, replied coldly, He is not mine. She basically unfriended him from existence. No inheritance, no homecoming. Just the eternal awkwardness of knowing that even your mum would rather you be a ghost than a coward. Socially, you were radioactive. You couldn't hold public office, couldn't vote, couldn't marry a respectable Spartan woman. You became a trembler, a specific category of social outcast with a name that literally implied you were still shaking from your disgrace. You might still be alive technically, but your life was now one long game of don't make eye contact. Why the extreme measures? Because Sparta's entire society was built around the idea that fearlessness in battle was the glue holding everything together. Every citizen was a soldier, and every soldier had to believe that their fellow Spartans would stand and fight to the death without flinching. The second you let someone get away with turning tail, you open the floodgates to 100 other scared teenagers going, well, if Threus got to run away and just got a bad cloak, maybe I'll try it too. Nope, Sparta wasn't about to let peer pressure work in reverse. So they made the punishment worse than death. Living with shame in Sparta was like being condemned to a slow-motion execution of your reputation. You'd attend festivals where no one spoke to you, stand in lines where people cut in front of you, be mocked by small children and middle-aged women who could probably beat you up. You weren't just disliked, you were an open wound on the pride of the city. And if you think someone could say, move away to Athens and start over with a nice pottery career, think again, even abroad, your shame followed you. Spartan reputation was legendary, and if you were known as the guy who ran away, you didn't get a clean slate. You got laughed out of symposiums by toga-clad philosophers with no abs and too much wine. There were even rumours that some disgraced warriors exiled themselves voluntarily, wandering off into the wilderness or foreign lands rather than endure the smothering humiliation back home. Others tried to win redemption by volunteering for suicidal missions, essentially saying, I messed up once, now let me die so hard that everyone forgets. Sometimes it worked, sometimes it just ended with more disgrace, but now also missing limbs. Spartan society didn't leave much room for nuance. You were either brave or dead. Anything else? Unacceptable. And that's the terrifying beauty of the Spartan mindset. It was ruthlessly simple. Loyalty, strength, courage, death. No exceptions, no excuses. No, I twisted my ankle and panicked. If you weren't willing to die for your city wasn't willing to let you live in peace. So, next time you imagine yourself in a Spartan helmet, standing proud with a spear in the hot Mediterranean sun, just remember, if you so much as flinch at the wrong time, you're one bad cloak away from being ghosted by your own mother. So, why did they live like this? You might be wondering why on earth anyone would agree to live like this. To have their entire life revolve around pain, discipline, and public floggings for cheese theft. Well, buckle up, because Sparta wasn't some random boot camp where people showed up for fun. It was a survival strategy, and an extreme one at that. Imagine Sparta like one giant military camp that just happened to have houses, farms, and a weird obsession with black broth. The city-state was carved out in the middle of ancient Greece, but unlike its flashy neighbour, Athens, it wasn't trying to be the intellectual capital or party hub of the Mediterranean. Nope. Sparta's entire reason for existing boiled down to one terrifying goal: defend the homeland from every possible enemy all the time. You see, Sparta was surrounded by potential threats on all sides, not just foreign invaders like the Persians or the Messenians, but also their own helots, the enslaved agricultural workers who vastly outnumbered the Spartans themselves. These helots were basically forced labour tied to the land, and their resentment was an ever-present ticking time bomb. The Spartans lived in constant fear of uprisings, because when you keep people enslaved and overworked, rebellion isn't a maybe, it's an eventuality. That's why Sparta needed every citizen to be a walking, talking war machine. They weren't just training for occasional battles or glory hunts. They were training for perpetual warfare and social control. Every Spartan was a soldier first, a citizen second, and a human being somewhere way down the list. The entire society was engineered to produce a population of highly disciplined warriors who could crush enemies abroad and keep their own enslaved workforce terrified and in line at home. Their answer to this existential threat: ruthless militarization. No compromises, no distractions like art, philosophy, or having fun. The Agoge school system hammered boys into shape. Spartan women were raised to be strong to bear stronger children, and even adult men lived like soldiers until their 30s. It was a total war society where everything, education, family life, social norms, revolved around the sword. And here's the kicker: it worked for centuries. Sparta was the envy and dread of the ancient world. They produced soldiers that could stand toe-to-toe with anyone. The legendary hoplites, with their bronze armor and massive shields, were unmatched on the battlefield. Sparta's military discipline was so fierce that even Athens, the powerhouse of culture and democracy, had to grudgingly admit Spartan warriors were a force to be reckoned with. Sparta's victory at the Battle of Thermopylae, where 300 Spartans famously held off thousands of Persian invaders, became the stuff of legend. That story alone has inspired countless movies, books, and "This is Sparta" memes. But behind the glory lay decades, no, centuries of relentless preparation, harsh discipline, and an unforgiving lifestyle. But here's the thing about extreme systems like Sparta's: they're incredibly fragile. The same rigidity that made Sparta a military powerhouse also made it incapable of adapting to change, because everything was designed around war and control. There was little room for innovation or growth outside of that narrow focus. No art flourished here. Forget about beautiful pottery or epic poetry. No groundbreaking ideas or technological advances came out of Sparta. The city-state was like a machine stuck in a loop, churning out soldiers, but not much else. And when the times changed, when new enemies emerged, or the political landscape shifted, the Spartan system showed its cracks. Their obsession with maintaining a pure warrior class meant they had a dwindling population of actual citizens. Wars and harsh training thinned their ranks, and the social structure made it difficult to replenish numbers or incorporate outsiders. Without a steady flow of fresh, strong recruits, the military might that had once been Sparta's pride began to fade. Plus, the reliance on the Helot slaves backfired. Constant revolts drained Spartan resources, and their brutal suppression tactics created enemies both inside and outside the city walls. Sparta's inability to reform or modernize politically and socially left it isolated and vulnerable. Eventually, Sparta's rigid, hyper-militarized society couldn't keep up with the changing world. When war stopped being Sparta's winning formula, when newer powers with more flexible, innovative approaches emerged, Sparta's dominance crumbled. The city that had once been the ultimate warrior society faded into the background of history, more of a cautionary tale than a model to emulate. So yes, Sparta lived like this: harsh, disciplined, brutal, because it believed that was the only way to survive in a world filled with enemies and threats. But like many extreme systems, its strength was also its weakness. The all-or-nothing, kill-or-be-killed mentality created unmatched warriors, but at the cost of everything else. In the end, Sparta's story is a lesson about balance. Sure, dedication and discipline can forge greatness, but without flexibility, empathy, and innovation, even the mightiest fortress can crumble. Let's be honest, if the wolves didn't get you as a newborn, the cheese-flogging competitions during your childhood probably would have broken your spirit by age 10, even if you somehow powered through the brutal murder internship known as the Cryptia, survived years of sleeping naked on scratchy reeds in freezing barracks, and endured endless marches while your muscles screamed for mercy, your troubles wouldn't be over. You'd still likely lose in a javelin contest to a 14-year-old Spartan girl named Threa, who trains by chasing wild boars through the woods for fun. No, seriously, that's how Spartan girls got strong. Sparta was intense, violent, relentless, the ancient equivalent of signing up for a lifetime membership to a boot camp run by drill sergeants who moonlight as medieval torturers Comfort? Nope. Fun? Forget it. Modern hygiene? Laughable. If you like your life with soft beds, reasonable workloads, and a steady supply of clean socks, Sparta was definitely not the place for you. The Spartan way was built for warriors, not wimps. It demanded the ultimate sacrifice, your childhood, your comfort, your individuality, all for the sake of the state. So unless you're secretly dreaming of waking up every day to black broth and a volley of spears, maybe stick to watching the movie 300 from your couch instead. Because surviving a day in Sparta, that's not just tough, it's practically impossible.